Hi everyone, this is Ellen, and today I am making something very special because today I am making a replica of Emily Dickinson's shawl. Now, I have been working on this project off and on for about 7 years now, so I am super excited. When I made my first attempt, I was an absolute beginner at crochet, and I assumed that it was made up of a granny stitch rectangle shape, all bunched together at the top to create a shawl like thing. I did not realize that part of the original shawl was even missing, so it looked like a rectangle to me. I made a small prototype. I tried it out on my dog to see if the general shape was right. I thought it looked quite fine on my dog, so I decided to go with this granny rectangle idea. And honestly, I think it turned out okay, especially considering that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing at the time. But here we are, 7 years later. I am much better at crochet. I still have some yarn left over, so I figured that it's time to try the shawl again. I have been studying the photo of the original shawl very closely, counting stitches, counting rows. I've also been studying some antique crochet patterns from that era, so I'm using techniques that were common at the time. Before we get started, I would like to shout out to all of my fellow Emily fans out there, my fellow nobodies, warm regards to you all. I would also like to extend a very special thank you to Harvard's Houghton Library for allowing me to share their photo of Emily's shawl with you. Please find a link to their website in the description below to learn more about this shawl, as well as see the rest of the Dickinson family collection that they have there. It's absolutely fascinating. You need to check it out. As you can see, the original shawl is a little worse for wear as it sits over 150 years later in the Houghton Library. The back is very tattered and looks moth-eaten and really falling apart. So part of my attempt today is to see what this shawl looked like when it was brand new. So for some history, this shawl was most likely originally made by Emily's cousin, Lou Norcross, in 1860. And Emily was most likely wearing this shawl when she met Thomas Wentworth Higginson, who described it as a, quote, blue net worsted shawl, end quote. Emily called it a cape when she sent her cousin a thank you note. And it really does wear like a cape, which I think is very fitting for a poetic superhero such as Emily. So for this project, I will be using a 4mm hook. And the yarn that I'm using is called Ultra Alpaca Fine. It is made by Baracco, and the color is turquoise mix. It is a wool, alpaca, and nylon mix. Now, obviously, Emily did not have alpaca in her shawl, and of course, there was no nylon in her shawl. But, the color, I think makes up for it, because as you can see here, it looks sort of blue, maybe a greenish blue here on the camera. My eyes, looking at this yarn in front of me, it looks green. It looks like the color that you see in the photograph that I'm sharing here. So, and this yarn does that. It will change color before your eyes. If I take this yarn outside, it will look blue in the natural light, unless I get into certain shades. Sometimes it even almost looks gray. It's weird. Sometimes it looks green when I take it inside, and like you see in the photograph. So because of the ambiguity of the original shawl's color, I love that this has color changing properties, this yarn. So I'm using this yarn. If I was going to make a more exact replica in the future, then I would use fingering weight 100% merino wool, and I would use dyes that were available at the time. But again, I'm using this yarn because I have it, I love it, and I think the color works really well, as does the size. Now, for the sad news, I bought this yarn 7 years ago, and it has since been discontinued, okay? Baracco does make a yarn called Ultra Alpaca Light in the same colorway. So you can use that. You'll end up with a very similar shawl. It will, however, be slightly heavier. You'd want to maybe use a hook that is maybe a 4.5mm hook, just to make up for that. But most people I think would prefer a larger shawl. Emily was a very small woman, small like the wren, she says, and she's right. The shawl is rather small. So if you want to make this yourself, you can either, follow my exact instructions. If you want to make it the same size, follow these exact instructions. Use a fingering weight yarn of any color you can find that's the closest to the Emily shawl color. If you'd like to make it bigger, use a larger hook, a larger yarn, or even add 6 chains to the starting chain, and you can make a larger size as well. You're the creator. It's up to you to make your shawl any way you like. You can use this tutorial as a launching pad to your own creation. I think this is a really great, really basic pattern that dates back to the Civil War era, at least, if not before. So, it's a classic. So you be the creator, but today we're making an Emily size shawl. Okay. Let's get started. Okay, so we begin by making a slip knot, as usual. Okay, slip knot, and now we're going to chain 68 chains. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you don't want to chain too tight. You want to chain a little loosely. 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 68 chains. Okay, 68 chains. Okay, so now that we have 68 chains, we're going to skip the first 5 chains, not counting the chain on our hook. We're going to skip the first 5. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the first 5 we're going to skip. And in the 6th chain, we're going to work a treble crochet. So to treble crochet, you're going to wrap the yarn around your hook 2 times, insert your hook into the 6th chain, pull up a loop. Now you're going to have 4 loops on your hook. We're going to grab our yarn and we're going to pull through 2 loops, pull through another 2 loops, and then pull through another 2 loops. And that is a treble crochet. Okay? And we're going to work another treble crochet into that same chain. Pull through 2 loops, 2 loops, 2 loops. That's 2 trebles. And then we're going to do a 3rd treble into that same chain right there. Triple treble. Pull through 2, pull through 2, and pull through 2. My yarn. Okay, so now we have 3 treble crochets in 1 stitch. Now we are going to chain 1, and we're going to skip 2 chains. I'm going to skip those 2 chains right there, and we're going to work a treble into the 3rd chain. There's the treble. And we're going to work 2 more trebles into that same chain. So essentially this is like a granny stitch where you would put 3 double crochets into the same stitch, only we're putting 3 trebles into the same stitch. So it's like a long granny stitch, really. Okay, so we have our 3 treble crochets in 1 stitch. And chain 1. And we're going to continue this pattern of chain 1, skip 2 chains, work 3 treble crochets in the 3rd stitch. We're going to do that till we repeated that 10 times. So I've chained 1. I'm going to skip these 2, and in the 3rd, I'm going to insert my hook and work treble number 1, treble number 2, and treble number 3. I have another little cluster of trebles right there. Chain 1. All right, chain 1. Skip those 2, and in the 3rd, we're gonna work our 3 trebles as before. Second treble. Excuse me. Let me do the second treble again. 1, 2. The chains get pulled, as you see. I like to try to pinch them when I'm working on them. And I think that's why it's a good idea to not chain too tightly, because you want to be able to see all of your chains when you're working on them. When one gets pulled, then the other ones shrink. All right, there we have 3 trebles. Chain 1, skip. See how this one got smaller? 1, 2 in the 3rd. 1, 2, 3. Yarn over twice. 1, 2, 3. Yarn over twice. Pull through 2 loops. Pull through 2 loops. So you pull through 2 loops 3 times. And there's your treble. So it's really easy. We're going to repeat this pattern until we have 10 clusters down the row, not including this first cluster that we work. So, or you can look at it as like 11 clusters plus this little first chain right here. Okay, so I have continued that pattern down my chain. I now have 11 treble crochet clusters down my chain with this one little extra chain at the end. So I've repeated that same pattern 10 times after I've completed that first little cluster. And now I'm at the center of my chain. So it changes a little bit here. We're going to chain 1. And instead of skipping any chains, we're going to work 3 treble crochets into the next chain. Okay, that's 1, pull through 2, pull through the 2. Okay, that's 1 treble. And then the second treble, double treble. And then the third treble in that same chain. Okay, and now we're just going to work as we had before. We're going to chain 1, we're going to skip 2, 1, 2, and in the third chain, we're going to work our 3 trebles. It's 1, 2, 3, 3, chain 1, skip 1, skip 1, 2, and in the third we work our 3 trebles. And we can do that. We repeat this pattern again 10 times until we get to the end. I'll meet you there and show you what to do. Okay, so I'm getting ready to work my last cluster of treble crochets in the very last stitch. It's 1 treble, 2 treble, and 3 treble in that very last stitch. And now I'm going to chain 1. And I'm going to work another treble into that same last stitch. Okay, so now we have completed row 1. we will turn our work. Okay, turn our work. And now we will begin row 2. To begin row 2, we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to skip the first treble crochet here. This initial chain that we started with counts as that first treble crochet, and then there was that chain 1 space. We're going to skip that, and we're going to work 3 treble crochets in that first space, that first chain space that we made. So that's 1 treble crochet, 2 treble crochets, and 3 treble crochets, all in that first chain space that we started at the beginning of our row. Okay, now we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip the first cluster. We're not going to work into the tops of any of these stitches. We're not going to do that. We're going to skip that whole cluster, and we're going to work 3 treble crochets in this space here, in this chain space. Okay, very much like a granny square at this point, only with trebles. So that's 1 treble crochet, 2 treble crochets, and 3 treble crochets. And then we will chain 1. We're going to skip that cluster again and work into this next chain space, 3 treble crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, etc., etc. We're going to continue this same pattern down the line 11 times in total until we reach the middle. Okay, so we have repeated our pattern of chain 1, skip the cluster of trebles, and then 3 trebles into the next chain space. We completed that 11 times, so we should have 11 clusters plus the first cluster that we started. And now we are at that point where we didn't skip the chain, so essentially the middle of the shawl. So what we're going to do now is that we are going to chain 1, and we're going to work 3 treble crochets in the same space. 1, 2, and 3. We work 3 trebles in that same chain space with a chain 1 in between them. Now we will return to our normal repeat of chaining 1, skipping the cluster, and working 3 treble crochets in the next chain space. And we're going to repeat that 11 times, just like we did on the other side, until we get to the end. And this is a pretty easy pattern. It's pretty repetitious. Row 3 is going to be the last row that you need to know for the bulk of the pattern until we get to the edging, of course, and the tassel and whatnot. But very similar to a granny square, only you're going to work. Oops, I lost my work. Don't like when that happens. Very similar to a granny square, or just the granny stitch that has double crochets. What I find interesting, I've been studying antique patterns as I've been studying Emily's shawl, and I found one in particular that is very similar looking, and it was published within 4 years of Emily's cousin making the shawl. And it mentions the treble crochet. However, that pattern was published in England, where they have a different crochet terminology. So when they say treble crochet in the UK, I'm going to want to work a double crochet here in the United States, because we have different crochet terminology. And Emily's cousin lived in the United States, but sometimes I wonder, did she look at a pattern from the UK and not know that there's a different terminology? Because she did work Emily's shawl with treble. It really looks like treble crochet to me when I study it closely. So maybe she intended to do treble crochets the whole time. Maybe the pattern she used was treble crochets. Or maybe she looked at a pattern from England and didn't know the difference and made treble crochets for Emily. Either way, the shawl turned out great. So it gives a little bit more of a netted look. And Colonel Higginson mentioned a netted shawl as well. So anyway, we're just gonna repeat that this pattern until we get to the end, and I'll meet you there. Okay, so we are now at the end of row 2 almost. I worked my last cluster into the last space, and what we're going to do at the end here is we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work 1 more treble crochet into that same space that we worked the previous 3 treble crochets. Okay, now we have completed row 2. So row 2 looks like this. We're starting to see the point of our shawl. This is going to be that back point, and then we have the 2 front sides, which are going to be the front of the shawl, and that's row 2. So now let's begin row 3. And row 3 is a very important row because rows 4 through however long you want to make it is going to be the exact same repeat. Okay, so what we do is we're going to turn our work to start row 3, and we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to skip the first treble crochet, which was the last one we made in the previous row, and we're going to work 3 treble crochets into this chain 1 space. So there's 1 treble crochet, 2 treble crochets, and 3 treble crochets. And now we're going to chain 1 and continue with that same repeat as before, working 3 treble crochets into each of the chain spaces with a chain 1 in between. So there's the 3rd. We chain 1. We skip this cluster. We work 3 treble crochets in the next cluster, just like we did in the previous row. And we continue working the same pattern until we reach the center. Okay, so here we are at the center, and we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work our 3 treble crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3, okay, so we made our 3 double crochets into that center. Now we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work another 3 treble crochets into that same stitch. The same space. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and then continue as we were before, skipping the cluster and then working 3 treble crochets into the next chain space. So we've got our center. We just keep working like this until we get to the end of the row. Okay, so here we are towards the end of row 3, and we're going to, let's see, I think I already, yes, I did my chain 1 already, and I'm going to work my 3 treble crochet cluster in the last chain space here. And then the 3rd treble, and then we will chain 1 and work 1 more treble into that same chain space. Okay, and that is row 3. It's the end of row 3. Your work should look like this. Your work should look like so. And every single row from here on out until we get to the edge is going to be the exact same as row 3. We're going to start by turning our work. We're going to chain 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to work 3 treble crochets into that very first chain 1 space in the previous row. The 3rd, we chain 1, and we just continue working 3 treble crochets in every single chain space across. We get to the center, we do the increase in the center as I showed you before in row 3. It's just all the same. Now, I am attempting to make a shawl the same dimensions as Emily Dickinson's shawl. You can do that. You can follow along with me if you have the same size yarn, same size hook, etc., etc. I think it's going to be about 34 rows. Might be 33, might be 35. I'm going to get to 34 and figure out the edging and do some measurements, and I'll let you know. So if you are making Emily Dickinson's shawl to dimensions, then keep watching the video for another minute or so to find out how many rows I got and before you continue working. If, however, you want to make a shawl that fits your dimensions, then work as many rows as you want. So you can work 20, you can work 40, 100, really, however many rows you want. This is your shawl and you are the creator. I will just let you know what I come up with, and I will see you in a minute. Okay, so here we are at the last stitch of the last row of the shawl. Now I crocheted 34 rows because Emily Dickinson's shawl indeed has 34 rows that I can count in the photograph. However, if you would like a larger shawl, then by all means, crochet more rows. If you would like a smaller shawl for yourself, then crochet fewer rows. But I am crocheting 34 rows, and the dimensions are very close to the overall dimensions that Harvard shares. So, okay, so I have crocheted my last treble crochet. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to tie off my yarn. I've already cut my yarn, and I'm going to tie off, and I am done with the treble crochet portion of the shawl. Now is time to make the edge of the shawl. So how we do that is we're going to grab the same yarn as before, or, you know, hey, if you want to use a different color yarn, that's up to you. But again, we're doing Emily here. I like to join yarn sometimes by doing a slip knot And then, okay, so we're going to start in this space to the right of our last cluster. And we are going to join our yarn into that space. Here, we're going to join our yarn. Get this other yarn out of the way. It's like a tangled mess here. Okay, we're going to chain one. We join our yarn, we chain one. And then we are going to work one single crochet into that first chain space there. And now what we're going to do is no more treble crochets. It's going to be mostly double crochets from here on out. And we're going to work 12 double crochets into this chain space right there, right in there. We're going to work 12 double crochets. So how we do that is we're going to yarn over one time. We're going to insert our hook into that space. We're going to pull up a loop. We're going to pull through 2 loops. And we're going to pull through the other 2 loops. That is a double crochet. Yarn over, pull through, pull up a loop, go through 2 loops, pull through 2. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could really use a yarn bowl for this yarn. 8. 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we've worked 12 double crochets along that, in that chain space. And then into this next chain space right here, we're going to work one single crochet. Pull up a loop and pull through those loops. And then the next space, we're going to work 8 double crochets. And it's going to be 8 double crochets, 1 single crochet, 8 double crochets, 1 single crochet. It's going to be that pattern pretty much all around the shawl, except in the corners where we are going to work 12. And then I'm also going to show you the tip of the shawl, what that looks like. So let me count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you run out of room, you can just scooch those over a little bit. 7, 8. And then single crochet in the next chain space. And then it's 8 double crochets. Let me see if I can get it more clearly here. Okay, so that's 2, 4, 6. Seven, 8, and a single crochet. So we just keep doing this pattern of 8 single, 8 single, all the way around until we get to the point of the shawl, and I'll meet you there, okay? Okay, so we've made it here to the neckline, the top of the neckline, And there is something different to do here. So I know I said we would meet at the point in the back, but we reached the neckline first. So let's do the neckline. Now, I really can't see what the neckline looks like in the picture of Emily Dickinson's shawl. It's just really, it's not accessible to my view. But I just want to make something that will lay flat, look nice, probably the same. And maybe one day I'll be able to go to Amherst and get a close-up look and handle the shawl, though I doubt they would let anybody do that, but one can dream. But for now, I'm just going to sort of wing this part. And so what we're going to do is the last cluster, instead of working 8, I worked 6. So there's only six double crochets here instead of 8. Okay. And then here I'm going to work a single crochet in the corner. And then I'm going to work 6 double crochets. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you have an odd number of rows instead of an even number that I have, then you don't really have to worry about this. You can just make your corners as you normally would. But anyway, so I worked 6 in here, and I'm going to work another single crochet into this stitch. And then I'm going to work another 6 double crochets into this next space. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then single crochet in the next chain space. And here we have our corner for our neckline. We're going to work across as we have been with 1 single crochet and then 8 double crochets, 1 single one. And when we get to that center area here, there should be a cluster of 8 here. And then just keep going until we get to the end of the neckline. I'll meet you there in a second. Okay, so I've gotten towards the end of my neckline. And I worked, this is my corner, and I worked 6 instead of 8 in the last space of the corner. And then in the corner here, I'm going to work my single crochet. And then my 6 double crochets. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then my single crochet. And then in my next chain space here, I'm going to work 8 double crochets, just like how we did on the other side, to make everything symmetrical. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a single in the next space, and so on and so forth down until we get to the next corner, in which we'll work our 12 double crochets like we did before. I'll meet you there, but right now this is what your neckline should look like. You should have a nice neckline like so. All right, I'll meet you at the next corner. Okay, so here we are at the next corner. We have this little corner here with this treble crochet, and we just made our single crochet in this space. and we are going to double crochet 12 double crochets into this corner here. Okay, that's 3. There's 4, 5, 6, 'Know, it's really funny the way this yarn looks blue in this video. In real life, it looks very much like the color in the picture of Emily Dickinson's shawl, kind of a blue-green, green-blue color. And that's one reason why I really like this yarn, because in some lights it looks blue and in some lights it looks green. And Colonel Higginson called it blue. Looks a little bit green though. So I thought, well, it seems like a magical yarn, so I went with this yarn. Let's see, that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12. One more. I'll share a picture of the full shawl when it's done, of course, and maybe you'll see the color. So, okay, so now that I've done my 12 here in the corner, I'm going to work my single crochet in the next chain space. And then 8 double crochets in the next chain space, followed by a single crochet until we get to the back point of the shawl. I will meet you there. Okay, so now I am at the back point of the shawl, and I just crocheted my single crochet there, and I'm coming to this space, and basically gonna crochet 12 double crochets here and see how it looks. I haven't tried this one yet. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oops. Scooch that over a little bit. 9, 10, 11, 12. And I did try this with a previous iteration of the shawl, but with this particular one, I'm just assuming it's going to work well. Yeah, 12 there in that corner. And then we will work a single crochet into the next chain space. And then back to 8 in the next chain space until we'll continue with that until we get all the way down to where we started. And we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch, but I'll meet you back there and we can do that together. All right, see you in a second. Okay, so here we are at the end of our row and back where we started from. And so we worked our 8 double crochets here. We would normally add a single crochet here, but there's already a single crochet here that we started with. So all we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook into that single crochet, pull our yarn through the stitch, and we're going to slip stitch into that last stitch. Okay, and then we're going to chain 1. We're going to cut our yarn. Pull the yarn through, and we are done. I'm going to weave these ends in. And yeah, we are done with our shawl for the most part. Okay, so I have completed the shawl, the Emily Dickinson shawl, and all that is left now to make is the tassels on the twisted cord. So let me show you how to do that.